So picture this. You're lying in bed, it's past midnight, and for some reason, you're doing the thing you always tell yourself you won't do anymore. You're opening the credit card app, not because anything's on fire, nothing's overdue. You have this itch to check, and there it is, the number, sitting exactly where it sat last week and the week before that, $14,300. And you feel this weird flicker of guilt mixed with something almost like resignation, as this number has just become a permanent fixture of your life, the way a stain on a rug eventually stops registering as a stain and just becomes part of the rug. You tell yourself you'll deal with it. Not tonight. Soon. You've been telling yourself that for, 2 years now? 3? And here's the strange part. You're not bad with money. You have a job. You pay your bills. You've even paid down chunks of this thing before, only to watch it creep back up. And somewhere in the back of your mind is this quiet, uncomfortable question you don't really let yourself finish. Is this just who I am now? Is this debt just mine, permanently, the way a birthmark is mine? My name is Jake, and I spend a lot of time thinking about the exact moment debt stops being a math problem and starts being an identity problem. Because here's what I've noticed after going down this rabbit hole for way longer than is probably healthy. Almost nobody who stays in debt for years is staying in debt because they can't do the arithmetic. They know the interest rate. They could tell you the minimum payment in their sleep. What keeps people stuck isn't a lack of numbers. It's a moment, a specific, almost invisible moment, where the debt quietly stops being something you're paying off and starts being something you're carrying. And once that shift happens, the debt behaves completely differently. It stops being a problem with a solution and starts being a permanent tenant in your financial life, a fixture, something you build your identity and your excuses around. I call this the ownership flip. And once you know what it looks like, you cannot unsee it in yourself or in basically everyone you know who's been stuck with the same balance for years. Let's talk about what actually happens mathematically first, because the math is honestly the easy part, and I think it helps to see it clearly before we get into the psychology. Say you've got $14,000 in credit card debt at a fairly typical 22% interest rate. If you pay $300 a month, here's the uncomfortable truth. Roughly $250 of that first payment goes straight to interest. Only about $50 actually touches the principal. You're not really making a dent, you're basically renting the debt. Now bump that payment to $500 a month, and suddenly $250 goes to interest, but $250 goes to principal too. You've doubled your payment, but you've 5 times your progress. And if you can get to $700 a month, something even more interesting happens. Now the interest is a shrinking piece of a growing pie, and every single month, a bigger and bigger chunk goes toward actually killing the balance, not just servicing it. There's a name for this in debt payoff math. Sometimes people call it the interest crossover point, the month where more of your payment starts going to principal than to interest. And for a typical high-interest credit card balance, paid down aggressively, that crossover often happens somewhere between month 8 and month 14. Which means, and this is the part that should honestly make you a little angry on your own behalf, most people who make minimum or near minimum payments never actually reach the crossover point. They pay for years and years, and the vast majority of every dollar they send just evaporates into interest, keeping the balance almost exactly where it started. It's like running on a treadmill and calling it a road trip. But here's the thing. I didn't bring you here just to show you the math, because if the math alone fixed this, nobody would stay in debt. Calculators exist. Interest rates are printed on your statement in plain English. The math has never been the mystery. What actually determines whether someone escapes debt in 18 months or 18 years is this ownership flip I mentioned, and it happens in 3 stages, and I want to walk through all 3 because I think you'll recognize yourself somewhere in here. Stage 1 is what I'd call the emergency stage. This is early on. The debt feels urgent, almost alarming. You remember exactly why each chunk of it exists. Maybe it was a car repair, a medical bill, a rough month where rent and groceries didn't leave room for anything else. In this stage, the debt has a story, and the story has a villain that isn't you. It was the circumstance. It was bad luck. And because of that, you're motivated. You throw extra payments at it when you can. You feel a genuine urgency to make it go away, the same way you'd feel urgency about a leak in your ceiling. Stage 2 is the normalization stage, and this is where things get quieter and more dangerous. The debt has been around long enough that the alarm bells stop ringing. You've made some payments, maybe the number even went down for a while, and your brain, which is remarkably good at adapting to almost anything, has started treating the debt as background noise instead of an emergency. The minimum payment becomes just another bill filed mentally next to your phone plan and your streaming subscriptions. It's not urgent anymore. It's just there. And here's the sneaky part. In this stage, extra windfalls, a bonus, a tax refund, a gift, stop automatically going toward the debt. You start rationalizing other uses for that money because on some level, the debt has stopped feeling like a 5-alarm fire. And then there's stage 3, the ownership stage, and this is the one nobody really talks about, but I think it's the most important one in this entire video. In stage 3, the debt has been around so long that it quietly becomes part of how you understand yourself, not consciously. Nobody thinks, I identify as a person in debt. But listen to the language people use once they hit this stage. They don't say, I have debt I'm paying off. They say, I'm just not good with money. They don't say, this balance is a temporary situation. They say, this is just my financial reality. The debt stops being something that happened to them and starts being something that explains them. And once your identity absorbs the debt, something really counterproductive kicks in. You start making decisions that are consistent with being a person who has debt instead of decisions consistent with being a person who is getting out of debt. You justify a purchase because, hey, you're already in debt, what's one more charge? You stop opening the app as often because looking at it feels less like information and more like a verdict on who you are. This is, I think, the actual reason debt payoff plans fail more often than the actual interest math would predict. It's not that the plan was mathematically wrong. It's that stage 3 quietly rewired the decision-making underneath the plan, and nobody accounted for that in the spreadsheet. So how do you know which stage you're in? Here's a quick, honest gut check. If you can tell me, right now, off the top of your head, roughly what your balance was 6 months ago and what it is today, you're probably still in stage 1 or maybe early stage 2, because you're still paying attention, still tracking it like a live problem. If you genuinely don't know, if you'd have to open the app to even guess within a couple $1,000s, that's usually a sign the debt has slid into background noise, into normalization. And if your honest reaction to that question was something closer to a shrug, a kind of, this is just how it is for me, that's the ownership stage talking, and I say that with zero judgment, because I've been there myself with a stretch of debt I genuinely stopped seeing as solvable for the better part of 2 years. Okay, so let's talk about how you actually reverse this, because identifying the problem without a way out would be a pretty unkind thing to do to you at this point in the video. The first move is what I'd call re-urgentizing the debt, which is a clunky word, but bear with me. You have to manually recreate the emergency stage on purpose because your brain isn't going to do it for you anymore. The simplest way to do this is to calculate in real dollars exactly what the debt is costing you per day. Not per year, per day. Take that 22% interest rate on $14,000, and you're looking at roughly $8 to $9 a day in pure interest, money that buys you nothing, builds you nothing, just evaporates. Put that number somewhere, you'll actually see it. Because I have debt is abstract and easy to normalize. I am losing $9 today, and I will lose $9 again tomorrow, whether I notice or not, is a lot harder to file away as background noise. The second move is breaking the identity language. This sounds almost too simple to matter, but the words you use to describe your situation to yourself actually shape the decisions you make inside that situation. Swap, I'm bad with money, for I made some decisions that created this balance, and I'm making different decisions now. Swap, this is my financial reality, for this is my financial history, and I'm actively changing it. It feels a little silly to say out loud, but the research on self-narrative and behavior change is pretty consistent here. People who describe their situation as a temporary condition make different choices than people who describe it as a permanent identity, even when the actual numbers are identical. The third move is what actually attacks the math directly, and it's the debt avalanche approach, just described honestly instead of dressed up. List every debt you have by interest rate, highest to. The fourth move, and this is the one people skip because it feels almost too aggressive, is treating windfalls as already spent, before they arrive. Tax refund, bonus, birthday money, whatever it is, decide in advance, before the money exists in your account, that it's going to the highest interest debt. Not, I'll think about it when it comes. Decide now, while you're thinking clearly, because stage 2 and stage 3, you are extremely good at rationalizing in the moment, and pre-deciding removes that decision from a version of you that isn't currently reading this. And the fifth move, honestly the quietest but maybe the most important, is picking a specific date, not a vague someday, a real date, when this debt will reach zero based on the actual math of what you can realistically pay. Write it down. Put it somewhere you'll see it. Because vague debt has no end, and things with no end are exactly the kind of things your brain slides into the ownership stage. A debt with a date is a project. A debt with no date is a condition. Here's what I want to leave you with. Somewhere out there right now, at this exact moment, there's a person with almost the identical income as you, almost the identical balance as you, who is going to be completely debt-free in 14 months. And there's someone else with that same balance who's going to still be carrying it, mostly unchanged, 5 years from now. The difference between those two people, more often than not, isn't income, and it isn't willpower in some vague, mystical sense. It's whether the debt stayed a problem or quietly became a person. Whether it stayed something they were doing or turned into something they were. Your debt is not a character trait. It's a balance on a piece of paper with an interest rate and a payoff date, and both of those things are things you can actually change starting today. Pick your highest rate. Calculate your daily bleed. Set your real date. And take it back from whatever stage it's quietly slipped into, because I promise you, it is far more solvable than it feels at midnight with the app open and the same number staring back at you again. If you found this video useful, make sure to like it, drop a comment, and subscribe to the channel.